Imagine waking up tomorrow as the most powerful man on earth. Your family controls the army, the treasury, the laws. Every noble house in the kingdom wants to marry into your bloodline. Every neighboring ruler dreams of turning your family into their family, because they all understand one simple truth. The moment you marry outside your own blood, your throne no longer belongs entirely to you. So what would you do? For some of history's greatest rulers, the answer was almost unbelievable. They married their own sisters, not distant relatives, not cousins, their actual full-blood sisters, and no one called it a crime. The priests blessed the ceremony, the people celebrated it, the kingdom accepted it as completely normal. Then the next generation did exactly the same thing, and the one after that. Here's the part almost nobody expects. This wasn't unique to Egypt. The Inca Empire reached the same conclusion. Ancient Hawaii reached the same conclusion. 3 civilizations, separated by thousands of miles, different languages, different gods, different histories. Yet somehow, all of them independently decided that the safest person for a ruler to marry was his own sister. At first, it sounds like madness, but by the end of this story, you'll realize it wasn't driven by love, or even religion. It was a political strategy so effective that it protected royal dynasties for centuries, before eventually destroying almost every one of them. To understand how something like this became normal, we have to leave the modern world behind and step into ancient Egypt. Picture yourself standing on the banks of the Nile 4,000 years ago. Towering temples rise above the horizon. Priests fill the streets with incense. Thousands of people bow as one man slowly approaches. Not because he is rich, not because he commands an army, because they genuinely believe they are looking at a living god. That man is the pharaoh. Today we think of a pharaoh as a king. The ancient Egyptians did not. To them, the pharaoh wasn't simply chosen by the gods. He was the earthly embodiment of Horus himself, the divine ruler responsible for keeping order in the universe. And at the very heart of Egyptian mythology stood the kingdom's most sacred royal couple, Osiris and Isis, brother and sister, husband and wife. Together they ruled the divine world. Now imagine growing up inside the royal palace, surrounded by that belief every single day. From the moment you're born, priests teach you that your family isn't merely descended from the gods. Your family is divine. If that's true, who could possibly be worthy of marrying you? A noble woman? She carries ordinary blood. A foreign princess? She belongs to another dynasty. A commoner? The idea would have been almost unthinkable. From their perspective, marrying outside the royal family wasn't simply a political mistake. It was a spiritual contradiction. Only one person possessed the same sacred blood, your sister. The only woman believed to share the exact same divine lineage. Within that worldview, sibling marriage didn't feel shocking. It felt inevitable. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because religion wasn't the real engine behind this tradition. It was the justification. The deeper reason had nothing to do with gods. It had everything to do with power. Behind every royal wedding, another battle was quietly being fought, not with swords, not with armies, but with bloodlines. And once you see that battle, everything these rulers did suddenly begins to make perfect sense. Religion made these marriages acceptable, but politics made them almost impossible to avoid. Because every royal wedding came with an invisible price. Imagine you're the ruler of the most powerful kingdom on earth. One day, you marry the daughter of another noble family. The kingdom celebrates. Foreign ambassadors bring gifts. Priests bless the union. From the outside, it looks like the perfect alliance. But inside the palace, something far more dangerous has just begun. Your new queen doesn't arrive alone. Her father expects influence over the throne. Her brothers expect military commands. Her relatives expect positions inside the royal court. And before long, another powerful family has quietly planted roots inside your kingdom. History is filled with dynasties that weren't destroyed by invading armies. They were slowly weakened from within. One marriage. One ambitious family. One generation later, the throne no longer truly belonged to the same bloodline. For rulers obsessed with absolute power, this wasn't an inconvenience. It was a nightmare. So they searched for a solution. A wife whose family couldn't demand land, couldn't demand titles, couldn't demand political favors, because her family was already the royal family. No foreign alliances. No ambitious father-in-law. No rival brothers. No competing bloodline waiting for its chance. The wealth stayed together. The throne stayed together. The dynasty stayed together. And above all, power stayed exactly where it already was. That's why sibling marriage survived for centuries. Not because it was romantic. Not because it was ordinary. But because it solved the political problem no other marriage could. Power has always feared one thing more than rebellion: sharing itself. And for generations, this seemed like the perfect answer, until history took an unexpected turn. Egypt fell. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered one of the oldest kingdoms on earth. The ancient pharaohs disappeared. A completely different dynasty inherited the throne. The Ptolemies. These rulers weren't Egyptian. They were Macedonian Greeks. Different language, different customs, different culture, different gods. If sibling marriage existed only because of Egyptian religion, this should have been the moment it disappeared forever. Instead, it became even more common. Ptolemy II married his own full sister, Arsinoe II. Then he did something almost impossible for modern people to understand. He proudly adopted the title Philadelphus, the sibling-loving one, not as an insult, not as a rumor whispered behind palace walls, as an official royal title, displayed across the kingdom. That tells us something extraordinary. By this point, sibling marriage wasn't simply tolerated, it had become a symbol of royal legitimacy, a public declaration that the throne belonged to one bloodline and one bloodline alone. The clearest example came just a few generations later. Cleopatra, one of history's most recognizable rulers. Most people remember her relationship with Julius Caesar or Mark Antony. Far fewer realize that, under Egyptian law, she also entered political marriages with two of her own younger brothers. Modern historians believe these unions existed largely to satisfy royal tradition rather than personal relationships. And that's exactly the point. Love was never the priority. Legitimacy was. The marriage itself sent a message. The royal bloodline remained unbroken. The dynasty remained complete. The throne remained untouchable. At this point, it would be easy to assume this was simply an Egyptian obsession. But that's where the entire mystery becomes even stranger. Because thousands of miles away, across an ocean no Egyptian had ever crossed, another civilization arrived at almost exactly the same conclusion. The Inca Empire. No contact with Egypt, no shared mythology, no shared language, no shared history. And yet the Sapa Inca, the supreme ruler of the empire, was expected to marry his own full sister. The explanation sounded different, but beneath the surface, the logic was almost identical. The Inca believed their rulers descended directly from Inti, the sun god. If the emperor carried sacred solar blood, then only his sister carried that same divine lineage. Marrying anyone else meant mixing sacred blood with ordinary blood. Different gods, same political strategy. Keep the bloodline pure, keep the throne secure, keep power inside the family. Then, history repeated itself once again. This time, on islands scattered across the Pacific Ocean. Among the highest-ranking chiefs of ancient Hawaii, a sacred tradition known as nopio allowed brothers and sisters of the highest rank to marry in order to produce children believed to possess the greatest possible spiritual authority, children so sacred that ordinary people lowered themselves in their presence, because in every one of these civilizations, power wasn't just inherited. It was believed to live inside the blood itself. Now step back and look at the pattern. Egypt, the Ptolemies, the Inca, ancient Hawaii, different continents, different religions, different histories, yet every one of them reached the same conclusion. When a family's authority depends on convincing the world its blood is sacred, the safest place to keep that blood is inside the family. It was an elegant political solution. For a while, because the very strategy that protected these dynasties was quietly creating a problem no king, no priest, and no empire could ever control. The problem was, nature never agreed with the plan. Long before scientists understood long before anyone had heard the word genetics, the human brain had already developed a defense against exactly this kind of relationship. Today, scientists call it the Westermarck effect. It's one of the most remarkable instincts our species possesses. Children who spend their earliest years growing up side by side almost always develop a deep subconscious aversion to each other as romantic partners later in life. Whether they're biologically related or not often doesn't matter. The brain recognizes early childhood familiarity and quietly places those people into a different category. Family, not potential partners. It's an evolutionary safeguard, one that likely helped humans avoid generations of harmful inbreeding long before anyone understood why it mattered. Which raises an obvious question. If this instinct is so deeply wired into us, how did royal families ignore it for centuries? The answer is surprisingly simple. They rarely grew up like ordinary families. A prince and a princess might be born to the same parents, yet spend most of childhood apart. Different nurses, different tutors, different servants, different wings of enormous palaces. Some royal siblings saw each other only during ceremonies or formal occasions. Without constant early childhood contact, the psychological barrier that normally develops between siblings often never formed with the same strength. The mythology justified the marriage. The palace made it possible. And politics made it necessary. But biology never stopped keeping score. No dynasty illustrates that better than the most famous pharaoh in history. Tutankhamun, for over a century, the world has admired his golden mask. But the greatest story wasn't hidden in the gold. It was hidden inside his bones. In 2010, Dinas studies revealed that Tutankhamun's parents were almost certainly full brother and sister. The royal family hadn't made this choice once. They had repeated it across generations, and the consequences were impossible to ignore. Tutankhamun suffered from serious health problems. He had a deformity in one foot that made walking painful. More than 100 walking sticks were discovered inside his tomb, many worn from actual use, not made simply for burial. His immune system appears to have been unusually fragile. By the age of just 19, the boy king was dead. Imagine standing inside that burial chamber today. Walls covered in gold. Treasures beyond imagination. One of the most famous funerary masks ever created. Then your eyes drift downward to dozens of worn walking sticks lying beside a teenager who ruled one of the richest kingdoms on earth. In that moment, the price of protecting a bloodline suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. But Egypt wasn't the only dynasty that learned this lesson. It simply learned it first. More than 2,000 years later, Europe's most powerful royal family made almost exactly the same mistake. The Habsburg dynasty rarely married brothers and sisters. Instead, they repeatedly married first cousins, uncles, and nieces. Each marriage looked politically sensible. Each one kept wealth, territory, and influence inside the family. But generation after generation, their genetic diversity continued to shrink. By the time Charles II of Spain was born in 1661, the consequences had become devastating. His jaw had grown so severely enlarged that eating and speaking were constant struggles. He suffered chronic illness throughout his life. He was physically weak. He faced serious developmental challenges, and despite ruling one of Europe's greatest empires, he left behind no heir. When Charles died in 1700, the Spanish Habsburg line died with him. What followed wasn't just a family tragedy, it was an international crisis. Europe erupted into the War of the Spanish Succession. Millions of lives were affected because generations earlier, one royal family believed preserving its bloodline mattered more than preserving its future. Different century, different continent, different religion, the same ending. When you step back from all of these stories, Egypt, the Ptolemies, the Inca, ancient Hawaii, the Habsburgs, a pattern begins to emerge. Every dynasty believed it had found the perfect way to preserve power forever. Every dynasty believed its bloodline was too important to mix with anyone else's, and every dynasty eventually discovered the same uncomfortable truth. Power can command armies, Power can build pyramids. Power can create myths. Power can convince millions of people that one family was chosen by the gods. But power cannot rewrite biology. Sooner or later, nature always has the final word. And maybe that's the real story hidden beneath all these royal marriages. This isn't simply a story about kings marrying their sisters. It's a story about what happens whenever people begin believing they're above the rules that govern everyone else. Every civilization created a different myth. Every dynasty invented a different justification. But they all reached the same destination, because the desire to preserve absolute power kept colliding with a force that cared nothing for crowns or kingdoms or gods. Reality, history remembers Tutankhamun for his golden mask, but perhaps his greatest legacy isn't the treasure buried with him, it's the warning his dynasty left behind. A reminder that the moment power begins protecting itself at any cost, it also begins planting the seeds of its own collapse. So the next time you see the face of an ancient pharaoh, don't just ask how he ruled. Ask what he was willing to sacrifice to keep that crown. If you enjoyed this journey into history's strangest traditions, subscribe for more stories where archaeology, science, and forgotten civilizations reveal the hidden forces that shaped our world. And tell me in the comments, which ancient civilization shocked you the most, and what mystery should we uncover next?